Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Save America Act will block illegal immigrants and non-citizens from voting. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there being spread by the media and my friends across the aisle. House Republicans and President Trump want to protect the ballot box and ensure integrity in our elections across this great country. Only U.S. citizens should participate in the election process. The laws we create in Congress affect all Americans, and Americans should be the ones who select their leaders. The Save America Act put in place safeguards, Mr. Speaker, to prevent non-citizens from abusing our democratic process. United States citizens should be the people choosing our elected leaders, not illegal immigrants. Now, look, I'm not a drinker. Everybody knows that. But I know if I go to Weigel's in Knoxville, Tennessee, down on the corner of Emory Road and Tazewell Pike, and if I go in there to buy a six-pack or a can of Skull or a scratch-off, dadgummit, I gotta produce an ID. When you purchase a firearm, when you board a plane, when you open a bank account, if I put $100 in the bank and then right then and ask for 20 of it back, guess what? I gotta show a dadgum ID. Why can't you vote for an elected official without one, Mr. Speaker? This legislation codifies President Trump's executive action to secure our voter registration process, which has been a key platform of President Trump this term. Democrats are lying, Mr. Speaker, saying this bill prevents minorities from registering to vote. It protects their vote. It protects every American citizen's vote. And it disgusts me, and frankly, I find it racist to assume that minorities cannot obtain an ID. We need to have the guts to stand up and protect our dadgum elections, Mr. Speaker, and that means we need to pass the Save America Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve.
What's up, family? So that was a mic drop right there. You guys heard the big boom. Yes, I had to add the cinematic sound effect to that because it was a mic drop. Once again. So now we got to talk about Abby Phillip show moment because this right here is the type of political argument that sounds powerful on X, formerly known as Twitter, but falls apart the second somebody says, okay, explain it. And we had this black liberal woman, her name go by Alencia Johnson, as you guys can see on the screen, which we're about to start the clip in a second. Basically on there saying that voter ID laws are racist, that requiring citizenship to require to vote or asking somebody to show ID to vote is somehow disfranchising black people. And when she actually gets pressed to explain it clearly, the explanation just evaporates. And I need everybody watching this, especially if you don't follow politics like that, to understand what we're even talking about before we jump into the emotions, because voter ID just means when you go to vote, you show a government issue ID like his driver's license, a state ID, passport, something that proves you are who you say you are. That's it. It's the same concept as showing ID to get on a plane, buy alcohol, pick up concert tickets, rent a car, get a hotel room, apply for a job, or cash a check. You live in America, you show ID for everything. So the claim being made is that requiring ID, that same ID to vote, which is literally deciding who runs the country, is racist and suppresses black voters. Now, suppression means stopping someone from doing something they have a legal right to do. So voter suppression would mean you're putting barriers in place that unfairly prevent people from voting. That's a serious accusation in itself, and that's not small. That's basically saying the system is intentionally blocking black people from political power. So when somebody makes that claim, the obvious next question is, okay, how? What specifically about showing ID stops black people but doesn't stop everyone else? Because IDs are not race coded. The DMV doesn't have a black line and a white line. A driver's license doesn't scan differently if you're black. So the argument you'll hear is that some black people are less likely to have government issue ID due to historical inequality, poverty, transportation issues, or bureaucratic barriers. That's the argument here you guys will see in a second. But here's where the logic gets tested. If that were broadly true, how do 75% of black Americans say they support voter ID laws? So you telling me the majority of black people support something that supposedly oppresses them? That's like saying 75% of people support locking themselves out their own house. That doesn't line up. And this is where the emotional narrative clashes with practical reality, because when you press someone and say, okay, give me a concrete example of how this law blocks a specific black voter, the conversation gets real vague. It becomes, well, historically or systemic this. But we're talking about right now in 2026 in modern America, where most adults, regardless of race, need ID to function in society. You can't even pick up a prescription without it sometimes. So the idea that requiring ID to vote is this impossible race hurdle, that's where people start scratching their heads. And let's break this down, right? Let's break down another term people like to throw around, right? Disfranchise. Disfranchise just mean to take away someone's right to vote. So if a law say black people can't vote, that's disfranchisement. If a law said you must show proof of citizenship before voting, that's not targeting race, that's targeting eligibility. Citizenship is not a race, it's a legal status. You're either a citizen or you're not. And voting in federal elections is legally for citizens. So that's not controversial. That's been the rule. So when somebody says requiring proof of citizenship is racist, they have to explain how verifying legal status equals targeting race. Because if we're being real, every country on earth limits national voting to citizenship, to citizens. And that's not some uniquely American villain move. That's basic sovereignty, meaning a country decides its own leadership through its own citizenships, or own citizens, I should say. Citizens. But that's like saying only family members get to decide what happens with grandmom's house. That's not oppression, that's membership. And what really stood out in this Abby Phillip clip here wasn't just a claim, it was the lack of explanation when challenged. Check it out.
This doesn't absolve Donald Trump of his racism. We all know exactly who he is. The reality is the conversation and the question should be, why do people continue to support him if they don't want us to believe they are okay with racism?
Wait, what voting rights is he taking away from black voters?
Oh, if we look at
the SAVE Act?
The SAVE Act, that's exactly what we're talking about. That is actually going to continue to disenfranchise overwhelmingly a lot of people of color. There are so many civil rights organizations that have run the data. If we look at the way that it is going to disenfranchise black voters, it's the same reason why Chuck Schumer called it Jim Crow 2.0.
So,
this is the same president. If we want to continue...
You haven't said how yet.
I am talking about it. It's the way that you're putting new poll taxes on this when you're making people have... That's what we can call them now. It's kind of an idiom, right? If you want to say that people have to prove that they are citizens, that they have to prove with a voter ID, the reality is you're layering what is a constitutional right for the American people and making it harder for people to vote in this country, and it's going to disenfranchise black voters.
Concern you that you're making all these claims? You've yet to lay out how it's hurting anyone, but 76% of black voters think we should show an ID to vote.
Mic drop. There's mic drop right there. And that's my whole point. It was the lack of explanation when challenged, because Scott Jennings asked Alencia Johnson multiple times, how is this disenfranchisement of black people? She never said how, right? Because when your argument is strong, you could walk people through it step by step. You don't just repeat as racist louder and louder and louder. You explain the mechanism. You show the math. You show the impact. If voter ID is suppressing millions of black voters, where are the numbers? Where are the documented cases of eligible black voters being systemically blocked because they couldn't get an ID? And I'm not saying no one anywhere has ever had difficulty in a country of 330 million people. Somebody somewhere has had a bureaucratic headache. But inconvenience is not the same as oppression. Waiting in line at the DMV is annoying for everybody. That's not racial discrimination. That's government inefficiency. And here's where common sense kicks in. If we agree voting is one of the most important civic acts you can do, literally choosing who runs the government, doesn't it make sense to verify identity? Imagine if you didn't need ID to vote. You just walk in, say a name, and boom, ballot. People will lose their minds about election integrity. Election integrity just means making sure our elections are secure and trustworthy. That's the right that's the right people are voting, right? That the right people are voting. Votes aren't duplicated, and the outcome reflects legitimate bias. So we're stuck in this weird place where one side says voter ID is racist suppression, and the other side says it's basic security. And instead of having a calm, fact based breakdown, we get emotional sound bites. But the problem is when you actually press someone to connect the dots, explain how this law targets black people in a way that doesn't apply to everyone else, the dots don't connect. And that's why moments like this matter, because politics isn't just about feelings, it's about policy, and policy needs logic. And if you're going to accuse a law of being racist, you need more than vibes, you need cause and effect, you need evidence. You need to show that the requirement disproportionately blocks a group in a measurable, intentional way. Otherwise, what's end up happening is people who don't even follow politics look at this and go, wait, I show ID to do everything. Why would this be different? And when they don't get a clear answer, they tune out the whole conversation, and that's the bigger issue. When arguments are weak, it damages credibility. If voter ID truly is suppression, the explanation should be airtight. But if the explanation falls apart under basic questioning, then maybe the claim isn't as solid as the headline makes it sound. And that's why this moment was telling, not because somebody disagreed, but because when pressed for specifics, the response wasn't specifics, it was repetition, and repetition is an explanation. It's just that simple. Let's continue.
80% of Hispanic voters, 83% of the American people. Are you saying that black voters
the
are
SAVE
too
Act
dumb to
isn't
know
just,
what's good for them? I mean,
the
it
SAVE Act
sounds
isn't
pretty,
just about
it sounds pretty condescending
not
to
what
me.
I said. That's not
You get three-quarters of black voters
That's not
who want
right.
voter ID.
But to be clear, the SAVE Act is not
putting
just
words in my
about
mouth.
ideas. The SAVE Act is about
So what?
proof of citizenship.
So what?
So it doesn't. I actually.
It also makes it very hard for married women who've
I
changed
was
their
just going to
last
say
name.
we've
This is
talked
all
about
young
this
people,
before.
by the way.
It's not. It actually. There's an argument to be made that red state voters, women, poor white voters could be just as.
I know you think they're dumb too, don't you?
Young
I mean,
voters?
that's the thing.
Nobody
I hear
thinks
these
they're dumb.
arguments. I've
Scott,
heard
hold on,
Democrats all
hold on,
week long.
Scott.
No,
Please don't. No, you listen.
There's a deflection from talking about Donald Trump's racism.
I'm actually
right there.
You should be thinking about your constituents or your
Yeah, I think they're smart
your
enough to figure out how to
colleagues in
register to vote,
Kentucky.
Abby.
Hold on. Most Americans don't have a passport. Many Americans don't have access to their birth certificate. Many women, a majority of women who change their names for marriage
listen,
have to provide additional proof that they've changed their legal names in order to register to vote.
I have heard
so
Democrats
Scott, why
make
don't
these
you
same
actually
arguments.
respond to the substance of what I'm saying?
I am, and
as
the substance
opposed
is
to
this.
making this
You're
about
saying,
something that it's not.
You're saying,
it's not just
you're
about
saying
voter ID.
married
It's
women,
also about
black
who has
voters,
access
and rural people
to,
are too stupid to figure out how to register to
me?
vote.
No, that's not.
All right. So now we're getting into the psychology of the whole thing, because this part right here is not even just about voter ID anymore. It's not about voter ID anymore. This is about the word racist and how that word gets weaponized in politics. And I need to slow this all the way down to really get you guys to understand it for the people in the back when it comes to this, right? Because the argument here is basically this. Most everyday Americans don't automatically walk around assuming Trump is racist. But there is a segment of people who have already decided in their mind that he is. And once somebody locks that belief in, there's almost nothing you can say to reverse it. I always say it's easier to teach a kid than a grown person, because a grown person is already stuck in their waves, right? That's the core point, though. And the bigger claim being made is that once someone labels you a racist in today's political climate, that label becomes permanent, and trying to defend yourself against it is pointless, because the accusation itself is being used as a political weapon, right? In politics, a smear is, attaching a negative label to someone in order to damage their reputation. It doesn't necessarily mean the claim is false. It means the label is being used strategically. So if you can successfully convince people that someone is racist, sexist, corrupt, evil, whatever, you don't even have to win every policy debate. That's what brings this conversation I'm having with you guys to take it a step further, as they're talking about voter ID and Abby Phillip, which is the most divisive woman ever. She's supposed to be a mediator, but she's always stopping people from talking instead of letting people get their thoughts off entirely, but she disrupts when really she's supposed to be a moderator / referee, but she continues to spew her nonsense into it, her sensical bull crap. But that's why I hate what she does on this show. I just hate the way she is when it comes to this divisiveness, and just report the facts and host. If you're going to sit there and host, just uphold the facts and then let people get their thoughts off with a difference of opinion and have a productive conversation as a moderator. And you can fact check accurately, not put your own opinions to it. And that's what really discredits Abby Phillip, which is why I'm not a big fan of her. But the whole point I'm saying, it begs the bigger question and begs to a different conversation, is what I'm saying. They attach Trump to be a racist, right? And if you can convince someone that he is racist, sexual, corrupt, evil, whatever, you don't even have to win a policy debate, which is why they're debating. And this should be a bipartisan thing, whether you're Democrat or whether you're Republicans, as Democrats are looking stupid because most of their base Democratic voters actually support voter ID. Black people support voter ID. So what's the fight for, right? Because now it's party over people. It's always been. And it's not the best interest of their constituents and American people. It's always been the best interest of party. That's why when it comes to it, they're constantly trying to label Trump a racist, where they don't have to win every policy debate. So you already morally disqualify someone in the minds of a lot of voters if you can convince them that Trump is a racist or bad man is orange, and that's powerful. And the argument here is that the word racist has become one of the strongest political weapons in modern America because nobody wants to be seen as a racist. It's one of the worst social labels you can have. So when conservatives or Republicans get called racist, some of them get into defense mode. They start apologizing, over-explaining, or bending over backwards trying to prove they're not racist. And a commentary commentary that they just gave about disfranchising black people and racism and so forth, that reaction is weak and pointless because the accusation isn't always about evidence. It's about narrative control. When it comes to CNN, as we know, that's a mainstream liberal media. We know that Abby Phillip is pro-Democrat no matter what. And you can see it played out. And narrative just means the story people believe about you. So if someone has already decided Trump is a racist or Republicans are racist or voter ID is racist, to tie it all together, then from that perspective, every action gets interpreted through that lens. And it's like someone, if they think you're a liar, right? Suddenly everything you say sounds suspicious. Even if you tell the truth, they're waiting for the lie. And that's confirmation bias. When people look for evidence to confirm what they already believe instead of examining things neutrally. So the argument here is conservatives should stop tap dancing, meaning stop performing defensively, trying to appease critics who already made up their minds, is my point. Even Donald Trump. Just stop entertaining. They already got their mind made up of trying to make them bad man orange, trying to make Republicans racist, trying to make voter ID racist, right? Just to make sure you say who you are to vote, to uphold the election integrity. But it's racist to have that requirement when you got ID for everything if you're a legal citizen. It all boils down to if you're legal and doing what you're supposed to do, what's the problem? If you're not doing nothing wrong, then you won't have to worry about ICE. You won't have to worry about getting captured by ICE and being held accountable, because the simple fact is you shouldn't be in this country illegally, such as the United States of America. And now we have to sit there and uphold the integrity of our elections because we have illegals that's not supposed to be in this country voting, but it's in favor, and it obviously is beneficial to the Democrat Party, which again proves my point. Party over people, then actually upholding the American people, which they are public officials getting paid by our tax dollars, but they can't sit there and respect us. But everything they do is a slap in the face to enrich themselves and make sure they stay in control, but not have the best interest of Americans, taxing them to death and not letting them live to the simple fact where they can actually live and achieve the American dream and leave things for their family members, loved ones, and their children to pass down for generation to generation. But you can if they tax you to death till they squeeze everything out of you, such as the Democrat Party, because they are the party of takers. Right? So when I break all that down and get this video a big thumbs up and let me know you guys' thoughts down in the conversation, comment below, because as always, we're having a conversation. If you're new to the family, subscribe and join the family. If you're already part of the family, I appreciate you for being part of the family. And for all who's watching this video just alone, I appreciate you for rocking with me. So to continue, right? The claim is that no matter what policy you support, border security, voter ID, tax cuts, if someone's strategy is to frame you as racist, to mobilize minority voters, then you cannot logically debate your way out of a moral accusation that was politically useful from the start. Now, let's explain the other side in simple terms so people understand the full chessboard. Many Democrats genuinely believe certain policies disproportionately harm minority communities. Disproportionate just means it affects one group more than the other. So when they call something racist, some of them mean intentionally racist, and others mean the outcome hurts minorities more, even if that wasn't the intent. And that's an important distinction because intent and impact are different things. Intent means what you meant to do. Impact means what actually happened. So some people argue policies like strict voter laws, aggressive policing, or immigration crackdowns may not say black people on paper, quote unquote, but in practice, they hit minority communities harder. That's their argument in the case of Abby Phillip and Alencia Johnson and these Democrats. That's their argument. The counter argument, which is what that this commentary is leaning to, is that not every policy disagreement that statistically affects groups differently equals racism, right? Because if you stretch the word too far, it loses meaning. That's where I'm going. And I'm going to say it again, because what Abby Phillip and them are leading into is that not every policy disagreement that statistically affects groups differently equals racism. So if you stretch that too far, it loses meaning. And when you overuse a word like racist, eventually people stop taking it seriously. And that's the part of the frustration being expressed here, because the feeling that the accusation gets thrown around so loosely that it becomes more about politics than actual discrimination. And here's the strategic layer that a lot of casual viewers don't see. Politics is about coalition building. Coalition means assembling groups of voters. If you can convince minority communities that one party is hostile to them, you lock in loyalty, right? So you have Abby Phillips arguing and Alencia Johnson arguing the racism label is used as a mobilization tool. That's all, meaning a way to energize people to vote a certain way, which is Democrat. Whether someone agrees with that or not, that's the claim they're making when it comes to voter ID being racist, and they're trying to use that to basically enrage and continue to strengthen the loyalty of pro-Democrat voters, right? But when you look at all of that, it is what it is. And when you see Scott Jennings basically saying, look, voter ID and basically identification to identify you saying who you are, which we use in our everyday lives, what you seen from Mr. Burchant in the first clip in the beginning of this video, Tim Burchant. Look, we all have to show ID, and it is what it is, and that's basically saying stop trying to win approval from people who have already decided you're morally corrupt, because the simple fact is, how can you be corrupt for proving who you say you are? So let them be what they say let them be, or make up whatever narrative they want to make up about Trump. Let them make up the nonsense of racism, but it is what it is when it comes to you legally already have to verify that you're a citizen. So there should be no difference when it comes to just adding a layer of election integrity. It is what it is on their end. If they want to continue to rock with the racism tip, which we know is just propaganda and narrative control, but it is what it is when it comes to citizenship and legal status and voter ID and being able to verify that. It is what it is, but the simple fact is election integrity, which is the policy which is important here, and voter ID should be upheld. So let them continue to spew this nonsense.
That is not what she said.
Are you saying they can't figure out how to vote?
Let me offer the proof.
Are you saying they can't figure out how to vote?
It is the exact same argument. It is a fact that a majority of Americans do not have passports. Many Americans, including white people, okay, do not have their original birth certificate or access to it.
You didn't say what you said rural.
I would love to offer the proof of this.
Yeah, because that is also relevant. It doesn't matter to me where people
I guess
live.
I have a little more faith in
Do they have
rural
access?
America and married women than you do.
Look, I don't know why you think why you're making this about whether you're smart or not.
You're saying that they can't vote, that they can't figure out how to document to register to vote?
Access to documentation of proof of where you were born or proof of citizenship is an additional thing that people
because
will
at
have
one
to
point
do.
black people actually weren't even allowed.
It's a barrier.
It is a barrier.
This is exactly.
Do you have your original birth certificate?
Yes.
Okay.
But at one point, black
does
people were not
everybody
even
that you know
allowed
have their original
certificates in
birth
this country.
certificate?
Everybody that I know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
But I know where mine is, and I know where my kids are.
There are elderly people in this country who are 80 years old, and they haven't seen their original birth certificate in decades.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. Now, she's saying that older people, for some reason, they haven't seen a birth certificate in decades. Now, before I get to that part with the birth certificate, and this is where the frustration really kicks in, because this ain't about voter ID no more. It's about what people believe underneath the argument, like the subtext, the unspoken part. And the claim being made is that when certain commentators say voter ID disfranchises, in this case, Abby Phillip, rural white voters or black voters or Latino voters, what they're really implying without saying it directly is that those groups are somehow less capable of handling basic civic requirements, that they're dumb, basically, that they can't acquire or go get an ID. And that's the part that feels insulting. So when you look at that, when someone says a law disfranchises a group, they're saying that law makes it harder for that group to vote. That's the word again, disfranchise. It just means blocking or discouraging someone from exercising their right to vote. Now, when you look at all of that, the critique here is pointing out a pattern in the rhetoric, right? That's where I'm going with this. And you'll often hear activists say, this hurt royal voters, or this hurt minorities, or this hurt poor communities. But you rarely hear someone say this law disfranchises wealthy suburban professionals or rich people, or this law disfranchises college professionals, educated people, or this law disfranchises rich donors. And the question being raised is why? Why is the assumption always that the burden falls on groups that are implicitly framed as less capable or dumb? Because when you constantly argue that certain communities can't obtain ID, can't navigate paperwork, can't figure out documentation, what are you really saying about those communities? And that's where Scott Jennings is going with it. That's why Scott Jennings said you're basically saying they're dumb. Black people are dumb. You're basically saying that. That's the accusation being made here, right? Whether intentionally or not, lowers expectations. And lowering expectations is a big deal. It's like if you had two kids and you constantly say, well, I expect one of them to handle responsibility, but the other one probably can't. Even if you think you're being protective, you're sending a message about competence. Now, let's also define something important, right? Jumping through the hoops. The phrase just means extra step or requirement. So critics of voter ID saying requiring ID is an extra hoop. You have to get documents, maybe take time off of work, maybe go to the DMV, maybe pay a fee. And their argument is that those extra steps hit low-income communities harder because they might have less flexible jobs, less transportation access, or less free time. That's the structural argument. Now, the counter argument, right, of when it comes to where my counter argument is, when it comes to the extra hoops is, it applies to everyone equally. So don't single out racial groups unless you're prepared to explain specifically why they in 2026 are uniquely incapable of meeting the requirements. Because the way it's framed basically makes it as if black people, Latino groups, rural whites can't do basic administrative tasks. And that's where the tension is for me. It feels patronizing. Patronizing just means talking down to someone like they're less competent or dumb, right? And if getting an ID is a basic adult responsibility that millions of black Latino, rural, and working class Americans already handle on an everyday, single day-to-day basis for their jobs, housing, banking, travel, healthcare. Why is it suddenly too much when it comes to voting? And this is where election integrity comes in. Election integrity just means making sure the elections are secure, accurate, and trustworthy. It means the right people vote only once, and the system verifies identity so nobody can cheat the process. Think of it like locking your front door. You're not saying your neighbors are criminals. You're saying the house is viable and you want basic security. Voting is deciding who controls trillions of dollars, foreign policy, the military, taxes, law. So the argument is if we require ID for way less important things, why won't we require it for this? And then comes the sharper accusation, right? That the idea that some activists are operating with this double standard. And this is their point. This is the sharper accusation. They say that documentation is reasonable for people they consider educated and are competent, but unreasonable for groups that they see as disadvantaged. That's what Abby Phillip and Alicia Johnson and the Democrats are basically saying. And the claim is that this mindset reveals a quiet belief that some voters are disorganized, dumb, and incapable to meet basic requirements. Whether that belief is intentional or not, that's what's being alleged. And that's why this debate got so heated, because nobody wants to be framed as no racist. This is bigger than Donald Trump, okay? This is how the Democrats see minority groups. Dumb, incapable, irresponsible. Come to us. Let us hold your hand. Let us take care of you. Give you food stamps. And that's why they always promote and prop up. The Democrat Party is basically the welfare party. They want to enable you and continue to tax you today and justify and helping everybody else, but nobody's taking accountability for their own actions, their own lives. Right? Oh, let's take care of the children. How about the woman respectfully stop opening up her damn legs? But why I gotta keep getting text on my check for sitting there keep taking care of somebody else's kids that I didn't lay in that bed and have them kids with that woman. So now they'll tax you to death to justify it in the way of welfare or food stamps or whatever the case may be to enable you, because they feel as though they need to take care of you because you incapable, just like you incapable to have voter ID to vote. But through those welfare and nonprofit social justice or humanitarian acts that they continue to tout about and continue to brag about, they commit fraud and basically building their pockets. So they getting kickbacks to fatten their pockets, but they act like they're helping you, but they really not. And they consider you dumb for the ones that's pro-Democrat, because also if you want to take it a step further, you keep voting the same way. So why would they change their attitude to figure that you're not dumb? That is why I'm here to speak the truth and have the productive conversation. Everyone is capable, everyone is competent. And I don't like that they're trying to paint everyone in minority groups dumb. If anything, we should show the Democrat Party that they dumb for choosing party over politics and party over people, instead of actually making sure that they uphold and have the best interest of American people, uphold laws, and actually pass policies that is the best interest of American people, not the best interest of party. So when you look at all of that, she says, oh, the birth certificate most old people can get. Let's be real. We're in 2026. Times have advanced. You can go on the portal. You go on the portal. I just renewed my car registration online in the DMV. I didn't go into the DMV. My son's birth certificate. And from Pennsylvania. You literally go online and you hit get access to my birth certificate. Now I have to show proof that I'm his parent, name the parents, where was he born at, show my proof of my identification to show that I'm his father and it matches up. What, I pay $20 to get it delivered to me to have my child's birth certificate in his county? And the same thing with me in my county like 4 or 5 years ago. I needed to get my birth certificate. I had to call the vital records within that county. And I paid $10 to go get my birth certificate, went up there in person, You can go online as well, but I went up there in person, showed my ID, such as my state issued driver's license, and got my damn birth certificate. So just stop the nonsense here.
They would need to provide
this is
proof of
fear-mongering.
citizenship.
It is not fear-mongering at all. It's not
That's
fear-mongering at all.
just a reality.
It's not fear-mongering
And
at all.
listen,
Jim Crow
here's how-
2.0.
Scott,
They say that about the Georgia law, and what happened? Voter participation
Scott,
went
The fact
up.
that you won't
Here's
answer
how
why you still
policy-
support
hold
a
on. Here's
racist
how
president
policy is
is
supposed to
actually
work in this country.
the problem.
And by the
You
way,
have a proposal, you look at the impacts of it, and you decide whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I think it is perfectly fair, whether you think that it disproportionately affects people of color or not, to ask the question, will a majority of Americans who want to be able to vote be able to access the documents that they would need
Yes, I
in
think
order
yes.
to prove
Clearly,
citizenship?
But Abby, you're asking
That's
the
your
underlying
view, but I'm
question,
saying
which is
people have
impact.
raised questions about that.
The reason that it works this way is impact. You mentioned Jim Crow 2.0.
No, I didn't.
What you
Schumer
just said, the words Jim Crow 2.0, so I'm going to put it right here at the moment. And that is exactly the way that Jim Crow 1.0 was born. They took laws.
Democrats were wily.
Yeah, I won't finish. They took laws that were operational in the North, and they said these work on by the in the letter, but we're going to disrupt the spirit. They're going to take these laws and use them on black people in the South to disenfranchise them, and that was the effect.
Well, there you have it. The nonsense that he's spewing. Race baiting, divisive rhetoric. Look, man. What I'm going to say is we're going to hit this argument hard without turning into this group is idiots or that race thinks this, right? So let's cook it the right way and equally unpack what's being argued from this man that just ended this clip. The core point that they're making here is that people say their argument, the main core point they're making is that people are saying they don't have their original birth certificate. Okay. If they don't physically have it in their drawer at home, I just gave you guys examples of how to get it. That doesn't mean it's going forever. I mentioned vital records. It means they don't currently possess a copy. So I have to talk to these Democrats like they slow on this. I'm just talking to you guys having a conversation, but apparently this is how slow they think minority groups are. So now I'm going to talk to them like they're slow because that's the energy they're giving. So when you look at it, right, it doesn't mean it's gone forever. They just don't currently possess a copy of that original birth certificate. So in America, a birth certificate is a public record. It's already on file. The government has it on file already. You're not being asked to create something from scratch. You're being asked to request a certified copy. It's already stamped, recognized by the government in a process in most counties. So go to the county website, Vital Records, like I said, fill out a form, verify your identity, pay a fee around $10 to $30. They mail it to you. That's not theory. You can go check for yourself, right? I lived it. So my frustration is with the idea that this process is being described like it's some impossible obstacle course is insane to me, right? Because clearly for people who don't follow this debate, a poll tax is when you literally charge someone in order to vote. That used to exist in American history. And it was used to block poor people, especially black Americans, for voting. That's illegal now. So when critics say, like Abby Phillips and them, well, if someone has to pay $20 for a birth certificate, that's basically a poll tax. What they're arguing is that any cost connected to the voting process could disproportionately affect low-income people. That's their logic. And what I'm looking at is $20 is not a fee to vote. It's a fee to obtain a legal document. Duh. So that people need for all kinds of life situations. It's not just voting, jobs, passports, school enrollment, benefits, marriage license. Birth certificates are basic identity documents. So framing that as something unique, racially targeted burden is very disingenuous and is a lie, right? So it's not hard for someone to basically handle this basic responsibility. It's not. I agree with Scott Jennings. Americans are very capable enough of requiring ID and handling their stuff and getting a birth certificate, voter ID, whatever they got to get. That's a government issue, right? And that's what it comes down to, right? So voting today is considered a constitutional right for adult citizens, right? That wasn't always the case historically. At the founding of the country, voting was limited mostly to white male property owners. Over time, through constitutional amendments, the 15th Amendment for black men, for the 19th for women, the 24th for banning poll taxes, and the 26th lowering the voting age to 18, voting became more universal. The United States is structured as a constitutional republic, right? So, which means citizens elect representatives to make laws rather than voting directly on every single law themselves. That's different from pure democracy, where every policy decision would be voted on directly by the public. So the founders, right? Founders were skeptical of what they called mob rule, meaning decisions driven by emotional majorities without safeguards. That's why they built layers into the system. The Electoral College, the Senate, originally chosen by state legislators before the 17th Amendment, lifetime appointed judges, all to slow down sudden shifts in power. So when you argue that the founders didn't want everyone voting, historically, yes, that's true. But it's also true that the country deliberately expanded voting rights over time because we collectively decided broader participation was more legitimate and fair. Now, the modern debate isn't about going back to property requirements. It's about what minimal standard is reasonable to protect election integrity. That's today's time. I'm going to say it again. It's about what minimal standard is reasonable to protect election integrity. Election integrity is just confidence that only eligible citizens vote and that each vote is legitimate. Not illegal immigrants, not individuals that's not supposed to be in the country in the first place, that are just going into these polls with no ID, no identification whatsoever, and just voting. Every illegal vote basically discredits an American vote because you have more illegals than Americans who can show their government ID, but they don't have to because based on state laws, when it comes to like California, you can just go in there and vote. You don't got to show nothing, just give a name. But if they're illegal, it discredits every legal right to a citizen who has a government issue ID and actually are entitled to voting fairly in elections, unlike the illegal who shouldn't have been in this country in the first place. This is common sense stuff, right? So when you look at all of that, and having an ID is adult responsibility on an everyday basis anyway, you're not losing nothing, right? Because it's something you've been doing in the first place this whole damn time, having a license, a government ID or something. When it comes to your health care and being received and all that. Even if you have a kid, right? When you go advocate for that kid, when you go take that kid to the doctor, show our license ID, so they can know who's coming in to accompany your child. If you have a family, if you at work and you have somebody that hey, you think you can take my kids to the doctors? You have to write on a form who you can allow to take your child to the doctors, and they have to show ID so they know who it is and who's on that form that you allowed to take your child to that doctor's appointment, because you the parent. Even if you showed up as a parent, you still have to show ID who you say you are. Even if the parent allows someone else and they wrote on paper to consent that grandma or whoever could take the child to the doctor's appointment, they still have to have ID to say who they are. So you ain't losing nothing. Right? So Abby Phillip could keep saying this original birth certificate, like that changes the difficulty level. And for people who don't deal with paperwork often, the wording can make it sound like you need some fragile, decades old document locked in and safe somewhere. But that's not how it works. The original birth certificate is just a very first copy issue when you were born. The certified copy is an official duplicate. Right? Duplicate issued by the country. Duplicate issued by the county or state that holds the record. Legally, that certified copy functions the exact same way as the original for identification purposes. So when someone emphasizes original, your argument is that it suddenly makes the requirement sound more extreme than it actually is, right? It's a framing move. Framing just showing words that shape how people emotionally interpret something, because that's all Abby Phillip was doing. That's why I agree with Scott Jennings when he said you're fear mongering, because she's framing it in a way to fear monger, right? You don't need that paper from 1989 sitting in your mom's attic. If you could request a certified copy from the county's vital records office, usually online now, you get it online and pay a fee and get it mailed to you. That's the process. It's not mystical. It's not impossible. Administrative. Now you're tying that to public opinion, saying most Americans support voter ID because they believe these steps are manageable. That's what most Americans, that's why 75% of Black Americans actually rock with it. It's manageable. Even the Democratic base support it. It's manageable. So I'm going to leave it there, family. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.